Words matter.
Welcome to the Words Matter Pod with Akil Pinnock, a podcast dedicated to wordsmiths. I'm here with award-winning designer and creative director, Erwin Hines. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Thank you for being a part of this. Like I said earlier, just off camera, I've been a supporter since 2020, and I believe that's when Future's Color started, right?
Yeah, it started in 2020, right after the murder of George Floyd, as a way for me to heal and respond through an artistic medium.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's great designs, but an even greater message. Is unfortunate that you had to create it. You created it out of that tragedy, but I mean, a lot of great things come out of tragedies.
Dude, this is true. It's actually been, we'll probably get into it. That's actually been one of the things that I've been kind of exploring through the artwork, which is how do you move past just being a response to oppression, but really lean into our beautiful Black heritage that has inspired and influenced society and culture throughout history. It doesn't have to just be the response, but we responded a particular way because we are a particular people.
Mm-hmm. So who are you?
Good question. That's super open-ended. So you already introduced me. My name is Erwin Hines. I am an artist, creative director, and designer. Traditionally trained as a designer, went to school, worked in the agency space for around like 10, 12 years. As a creative director, working with like the Googles, the Apples, the coaches of the world. And then just over time, realized that, or I started feeling like a tension, where it's like I was giving my story to these like large organizations. It's not to say we can't, but I was just feeling this tension where I wanted to be able to express and tell my story through my own medium without it being filtered, without it being utilized just to sell something. And so that's like a short sort of summary of who I am. But going further back than that, I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, then went to school in Maryland for architecture, took some time off after my first year because I wasn't necessarily the best at math. And at that point, I was like also not trying to learn it. And in order to be an architect, obviously you have to be able to make buildings stand, and that takes math. But the principles of architecture is still something that drives a lot of my design principles and all of the things that I sort of touch, which is more of a view of urban planning and urban design, and how the things we create ultimately will shape how communities and how people view themselves within the world that we're shaping. And so I kind of approach everything with that intention and also that responsibility. And then fast forward, I then went back to school for design, fell in love with branding and the power of branding to shape space, and then moved out to California. And I've been in California, particularly in San Diego, for the last like 13, 14 years. I keep saying 10 years, but it's like, basically it's like I'm originally from Cleveland, so I definitely have part of that as who I am. But my sort of formative college years were like spread out between Maryland, New York, Philly, Pittsburgh, and then sort of my adult formative years as a creative and designer have all been in San Diego.
And speaking of architecture, a lot of designers went to school for architecture. Virgil went to school for architecture as well. So it's interesting because I've never known architecture to be synonymous with clothing. I've just known it to be synonymous with building buildings, but
nah, I think architecture, like in architecture, you think more like theoretically, and you think on a very large scale of how is this going to influence and impact people. And I think oftentimes when you're purely focused on design for just aesthetic and just it looking cool, you're not necessarily focused on like, how is this going to actually leave a footprint
Yeah.
for people and for society and for culture, and specifically with like Black designers. Um, there's just so much that we can put forward as far as storytelling, and we have our eyes open to so much because of our lived experiences.
Hmm.
And so bringing that into the space and bringing this theoretical sort of lens into all design spaces is tremendously helpful. It's like from that, and then when I was in the agency space, I was actually doing like more UX
Hmm.
design, so like doing big websites for Google and all of that stuff. And with that, you also are thinking about like digital systems and how those
Yeah.
digital systems influence the world. So to me, it's like architecture as a principle and as a theory is like super inspiring, as well as like informs mostly everything I do as a
Yeah.
designer, even as like a shirt designer or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, that's something that I'm sure a lot of people didn't know about. So thank you for divulging.
Oh, of course, of course.
So you said you're from Cleveland.
Yeah.
When does your story start as far as, you being the person who you are right now? When do you think that started?
I mean, I know when it started. Like this is something that I've done where it's like sort of do a retrospective and like look and trace back like key moments in my life and how I became whoever I am now and how I'm still in a state of becoming, right? So my parents actually built housing, uh, particularly on like when they built affordable housing. And oftentimes when you think about affordable housing in the inner city, it's like run by people who don't care about our people. And therefore, some of that housing will not be well maintained over
Yeah.
time, right? And then the property ends up losing value. And so what was made in order to help people increase their value ends up decreasing their value, because now if they're in debt or whatever with that housing and they can't sell it because now it's not been taken care of. And so my family built the affordable housing, but then we also had landscaping, exterminating, and all of these other like sort of ecosystem pieces that you need to maintain housing. And then we would actually help take care of all of those housing developments that we would then
Yeah.
build. And then for me as a kid, like I had to go with them every single weekend and every summer. Like I didn't have like child summers where I could go out and play with my homies. It was like, no, you're going to work. You're going to landscape. You're going to like clean up the construction sites, etc. But I think what that instilled in me over time, and what I begin to see, is that the things we create as creators, as Black people, as just humans, can ultimately influence and impact us in our community, right? And so that's where it started. That's where like the direct connection between like creation, human artifacts, and actually giving back and building
Yeah.
people and building up our own community started. And then my parents also had me in Jack and Jill, which Jack and Jill mainly does a lot of community service stuff. And then my family was active in the church through the community service lens. And so it's just like, if I wasn't on the construction sites or on landscape and learning hard work and like seeing the direct connection, I was doing like community service. And so for me, it was just in me from how I was brought up to create something that then also has the intention of helping to help our own people and create space for our own people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were your parents, I mean, they worked in housing, affordable housing. Were they creative as well?
Uh, I don't even know. I want to say yeah,
Yeah.
because I feel like you have to be creative in order to work your way through a system, any system, especially when they were growing up. And if I look back even further, it's like both of my grandparents were also business owners.
Yeah.
And so as like a Black person owning your own business in these different spaces, I think you have to be creative. You have to be able to paint a picture of yourself in the future that you haven't seen before, which
Mhm.
is what creativity is, right? Like being the first Black person to do this is like you had to basically envision yourself doing that, whether it's in finance, Jackie Robinson, whether it's in anything. It's like you are creative if you are able to basically envision yourself before there was another person to show you what that looks like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say my parents are definitely creative for sure.
And I like that you mentioned that because a lot of times people, when they're just in modes of survival, they may have some plans and dreams of anything related to the arts, whether it be
Mhm.
music or fashion or anything creative, but they kind of put that to the side to pursue, a job for just, so that the family can survive.
Yeah.
So, people push that creativity to the side, but
Bro.
I like that you put it like that, that, even while you're trying to survive, you still are being creative at the same time.
Yeah, bro. I mean, that's like sometimes you have to do what you have to do, right? In order to make sure that you and your family can survive. I think it's a luxury to just be like, yo, just follow
Mhm.
your creative passion. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, that's a true luxury. But to me, it's up to all of us to help create that opportunity for the younger generations who look like us, for
Yeah.
them to be able to follow their own dreams, right? For them to be able to like project themselves into the future and go like, yo, I can go into space like Elon Musk, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think we don't see ourselves in those positions. Therefore, it might limit the ultimate potential of what we can truly be. Because I feel like we can be creative in any space. We can be creative outside of just like fashion, outside of art, outside of music. Like we've owned those things, but I feel like we can lead um, the space race. We can lead sort of like what is the next frontier of humanity that's more rooted in like holistic thinking and
Yeah.
um, principles of like Black community. I don't know. Yeah, that
No,
was
yeah.
I was like, I can go off on tangents, bro.
I go off on all the tangents.
But yeah, like um, I think it's important for everybody to be able to follow that dream, but also
Yeah.
realizing that there is a reality that people have to take care of their families.
Yeah.
But if these people have to take care of their families, how do we all make sure that those families are taken care of so that those families can then also explore their sort of passion and creativity? That to me is like what true freedom and equity is all about. Like, equity at the end of the day would allow all of us to have that freedom to follow our dreams, to chase our passions, to not be
Mhm.
bogged down by a system of oppression that has like said like, oh, you guys have the freedom to be like gallivant around the world and explore who you are and find
Yeah.
out your like true sense of self, while you guys in these other communities, you guys have the freedom to work hard within the system that wasn't designed to build you up at all, right? But we'll keep you working.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like in my head, like that's what it's developed into over time. Is like that to me is what the true freedom is. It's like the ability to find yourself and the ability to like find your own joy
Yeah.
inside of like your purpose and your passion.
Yeah. Where did you get your start in design?
Ooh. Uh, I would say it started with the architecture stuff. Like when I was in architecture school my first year, like I was like in CAD and I was like designing. Actually, it goes back. So in high school, like when I was growing up, I would draw, right? Like most artists. But in high school, I actually started doing cut and sew. So I started making clothes. Um, and I also was trying to be a rapper as well, but no one was buying my albums at all. People were like copying my clothes. Like they would buy like the pants I would make, the sneakers I would make. And then I'd like try and sneak an album in there and be like, nah, man, you kind of
That's,
suck.
that's too much of a commitment for
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. And I was just like, no, you're just a hater. I'm gonna do this. So like, I feel like I've always tried to sort of like have these like modes of expressive or creative expression, but like the thing that I was like able to really lean into and like hustle and like make money on was making clothes or doing airbrush shirts and all that stuff. And then architecture for me was because I saw my parents doing housing, the creative mechanism within the housing structure is architecture. So for me, that was my pathway into creative. I didn't see fine art as a path. I didn't see fashion as a path. This is like before Virgil, before Samuel Ross, before all of these people, before Kirby. So I was like, yeah, fashion is not for me.
Yeah.
I'll wear it and I like it. But for me, it started there. Then pivoted to architecture. When I was in architecture school, I then took art history classes and then saw art as a pathway through people like Basquiat, where I was like, oh, this person looks like me. And they actually created opportunity for others who look like me in the high art space by bridging that gap between street art and high art and opening the doors. And so then I took time off, went to New York, played around there as like figuring out who I am as an artist, as a creative. And I was still making shoes. And then one of my friends that was actually like, yo, I go to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which also is not like the greatest art school at all. But they were like, I go to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, like you should check it out. I was like, all right. And then I just went just because I was like, I don't have anything else to do. I'm just kind of like floating around, dabbling in art. And then in that program, they put you in graphic design if you don't have a portfolio. So I kind of got placed into graphic design because I didn't actually have a portfolio. All I had was like sneakers that I had made. Like I initially wanted to do game design because game design to me was like, just like architecture in the real world, game design is like designing space for people to sort of coexist in like the digital world, which obviously people do that all, even we're doing that right now, right? Yeah. So that was what I wanted to do, but I couldn't because I didn't have a portfolio. So graphic design, and then just over time fell in love with graphic design and branding and what it could do. And then got my like first agency job right out of high school, right out of college. I got my first agency job. And then again, worked in the agency space as a creative director at one of the top agencies for the last like 12 years. So that was my pathway into the design world.
Yeah. Thank you for, telling your path like that, because it's kind of non-traditional in a way, because many people, when they have these dreams from a very young age, and you kind of came into your own in your, post high school.
Yeah, bro. No, this is facts.
Yeah.
It took a little while for sure. And I feel like not all pathways, like you're saying, are the same. Like not everybody has to go to a traditional design school and all that stuff. For me, I needed to because I didn't even know graphic design was a field. I had no clue, man. Like I was just like, as I was going through that process, I was literally learning new fields and my mind was like opening. So for me, college and university did what it needed to do, which is like open your mind to the potential you have as a human being in this world. So it was like, I loved going to like classes. And then since I was in Pittsburgh and my school wasn't necessarily the best academically, I would then go over to Carnegie Mellon. So I had the luxury of like just taking a bus over to Carnegie Mellon and having friends who were in the architecture program there and just like sitting in on classes. And like I would sit in on lectures around like healthcare and like the future of healthcare, just like anything where I can just learn about like the human condition. And so even with my work now, I would say that it's more around like the anthropological research and understanding of humanity and how humanity has developed, and then responding to tensions or things that don't make sense to me within that human development, right? And so that's how I can, I guess now I move across different spaces. So I have Futurist Color, which is clothing and that type of stuff, but through Futurist Color, I also work with people like the Academy Awards to do like digital experiences that trace the history of Black influence throughout cinema. Or I work with like the ACLU to do commercials, et cetera. And then I also, on the other hand, have like actual physical spaces. So I'm a owner of 3 restaurants, of a restaurant group. And then we have actually like 3 restaurants here in San Diego. But the goal of those is to create physical space that reclaims our communities back. So it's not just like restaurants for the sake of restaurants. It's not clothing for the sake of clothing. Everything has like a very defined intention and like, I guess, shaping space for conversation, empathy, and growth. Again, tangent, long-winded, bro. Sorry.
Nice. I mean, it's great. I don't have any problems with that. What was the one moment that radicalized you?
Ooh, man. What you mean by that?
So the messaging on your clothing on Futurist Color and just your intentions, are just black empowerment and black joy and just emphasizing just blackness and black culture. And you have a shirt and you have a hoodie as well that says you can't support
Yeah,
the people without, you can't support the culture without supporting the people. So
yeah.
what are the events, or what was that one event in your youth or maybe a little older that radicalized you and made you be passionate about this?
I think honestly, it was my family. I have a very, very strong, proud Black family. Like there's diverse people in my family, and then my grandma is Filipino,
Yeah,
but um, everybody is proud as hell about around their Blackness,
yeah,
and I've seen the spectrum of Blackness, and so and my parents like, or actually my aunt, when I was growing up, instead of getting me like zoo books or like the things that other kids might get, I got like these books around kind of important and influential Black people. And so every month I would get one. And it wasn't just like the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, which obviously are important, but it was the Lena Horns. It was like, it was everybody. And so I got to see this beautiful spectrum of Blackness and how we've operated, um, again, throughout history. So I think for me, it started from a very young age. And then again, seeing my parents build the housing, seeing both my grandparents being business owners as Black people in Cleveland, knowing their history and knowing their story, knowing that my great grandfather was a escaped slave successfully, who then was able to buy and own land in Arkansas.
yeah,
Like knowing, I think like knowing those things and then knowing my own story made me super proud of who I am. And I think the tension of like how I felt when George Floyd was murdered, because Black people have been murdered before by the police, right?
of
We've
course.
had we've had these issues, but something about that particular one, it triggered all of those experiences and all of those memories. And so that's what also triggered that like first statement of like, how can you love us so much
Yeah,
but not support it? Like literally just support us, bro. Like we don't even ask for that much. Like just support us. Stop killing us. Like let us live.
yeah. Literally,
And I
literally
and I
stop killing us.
yeah. And I think like for me, that's what led to that. And that's what began to lead to everything, was really just me understanding and having access to my own history and knowledge around my own history and my family's history, that then gave me the power and the strength to like continuously release these messages and also dig deeper. Like I didn't know about the amazing Black feminist writers. Like I didn't know about Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks,
Yeah,
and I didn't know about like, I didn't know in depth about like Afrofuturism. I didn't know in depth about any of these different movements that we have shaped and created. I just knew I was proud to be Black because of what my parents put in me, right? And so I think each of the shirts now is an expression of my ongoing learning around myself,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So I don't think I think literally it wasn't like there was a
A moment.
trigger
Yeah,
point, there was a tension point. The trigger point was George Floyd, but it was based on everything. And I think that's all of us. Like, there's not one moment that makes somebody a billionaire. There's not one moment that makes this person this or this. It's a collection of all of our lived experiences. And when we can open ourselves up to all of those lived experiences, then that's when we can unlock like more potential. And to me, that's also why like the whole lines around mental health and all that stuff become important, because for us as Black men, Black people, to be able to tap into who we are
yeah.
also sometimes means we're going to have to re-deal with traumas. And
Mhm.
how are we re-dealing with those traumas, and how do we create space for ourselves to even like have those conversations? So yeah, again, it wasn't one moment. It was like a collection of all my lived experiences
Yeah,
that go into every single piece.
yeah. And you see that because they all the pieces represent something different, but all
Um,
related to just Black people as a whole.
yes,
And
yes,
Filipino people as well, because you have a collection that was where the proceeds were donated to victims of the hurricane and
the typhoon
the
there.
typhoon in Philippines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like my main, I guess my main space to sort of express the Filipino stuff, which is why I don't release as many clothing around it, is mainly because all of the restaurants I'm a part of are actually Filipino based.
Okay.
And so a lot of those spaces are around like, how do we actually express and tell the Filipino narrative? And for me, again, it's important for me to get in touch and like in contact with that side of my heritage. My grandma actually had dementia. And so by the time I cared enough, like as an adult, to ask her the questions, she didn't have the stories to tell me, or she couldn't remember. So it's like that side of my history was like slightly lost. I just know that she's Filipino. I know sort of the narrative,
Yeah.
but like through food and through the restaurants, I get to actually connect with that side of my heritage even more.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the clothing used to be named Crafted Goods.
Mhm.
Why change the name to Futurist Color?
Crafted was actually um, so that was a series that me and my friend did that kind of led to the restaurants, led to Futurist Color, led to me stepping out on my own and gave me the power, I guess. So while I was working at the agency, whose name is Basic, as a creative director, I was also, on top of being in charge of the projects, I was also in charge of internal culture and like community outreach.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges we had in San Diego is that you have a lot of creatives, which is like, you wouldn't think that about San Diego. There's a lot of like diverse creatives. We have some of the best dancers, chefs, poets, etc. But we also have high creative attrition. So a lot of creatives leave San Diego because they're like, yo, ain't no opportunities here. There's no other creatives here. So even within San Diego, people don't know that there's other creative spaces and industries. And so we created, in order to respond to that, we created a dinner series that ran for 18 months where we brought together 12 people from different spaces around San Diego that had never met. That was Crafted. And with Crafted, I didn't want to like make random giveaways for people or like takeaways. So I ended up making shirts. So each dinner had a theme. And so one of the themes would be like identity. And that whole dinner was about exploring what identity means to us and what identity is. And so the reason the shirts have a lot of copy on them now is because the Crafted shirts have a lot of copy on them. So what started as Crafted, which was the dinner series,
Yeah.
stays as Crafted. I just released the shirts through that platform because that was the only Shopify that I had. I
Awesome.
didn't have another Shopify. So literally, like it just happened to be released through there. And also people started liking and buying the Crafted shirts right before the pandemic. Like they started just like fucking with it because they were cool designs. They like touched on like cultural things and like empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And so me myself on Instagram, I think I had like 300 followers. So I didn't have a platform to actually release anything. And so that's why it was Crafted at first. And like slowly, I was like, do I put it under my name as Erwin? But then I also didn't want to do that because I didn't want to get, as an individual, I didn't want my identity to be tied to just these shirts that I was releasing. So then I started Futurist Color as its own entity. And it originally was, Futurist Color originally was like a program that I started in Cleveland along with the NAACP, Boys and Girls Club, and the local school system there, to actually do what I had when I was growing up, which was like receive that history, receive the pride by understanding my own story.
Yeah.
And so we created a 6-month-long program for kids in the school to actually learn about their own history, learn about their own narrative, and it became a part of sort of the school curriculum. So it was almost like critical race theory before critical race theory type thing.
Yeah.
But so that's where the name developed out of. And then I just took it and then made it the brand name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is Futurist Color? What does that mean exactly? Like, what do you want people to learn from that title?
So on the surface, you could just say like Futurist Color is like future is like diverse, it's blackness, it's all of those things, right? Like we exist in the future type thing. But on a deeper level, on a more sort of like humanitarian level, it's looking at like when color TV was introduced before, when there was black and white TV.
Yeah.
When color TV was introduced, it introduced a spectrum of beauty, a spectrum of color. It introduced more richness, more texture to the world. And we can't go back now and go like, yo, I just want to have black and white TV. Like people do it cinematically, but like to lose all of that richness and all that color from our photography, from TV would be like, what are we doing? This doesn't feel real. This feels stale. And so to me, Futurist Color is actually about embracing the spectrum within all of us and within the world. And that's where the beauty truly comes from. It's by embracing that amazing spectrum. And it's also about saying like, me as a black man, we are different, right? Like people might go like, yo, all black people are the same. But it's also embracing the spectrum even within blackness, embracing the spectrum within the Latino community. It's just, to me, that's what Futurist Color means. It's embracing the beautiful spectrum and recognizing that we're all multidimensional, not like in a weird metaphysical way. It's like we all have multiple dimensions to us, right? Like part of my dimensions would be Cleveland, Maryland, Philly, Cali, Black, Filipino, my age, all of those things add different dimensions to who we are. And sometimes I feel like we pick one and then we're like, yo, this is who I am. And we limit our potential. Yeah. So that's what Futurist Color means to me.
Your website states that Futurist Color serves as wearable conversation whose purpose is to create meaningful conversation of change through design. How effective do you think designs are when it comes to the creation of meaningful conversation through design?
I hate like tooting my own horn. I think they're very effective. Well, the reason I think they're very effective, like I created it at first not to sell. Like when I made my first one, it literally was like, I went to go to a protest and then I saw the police officers getting off their motorcycles with their batons out. And I immediately backed down a one-way street because there's not a lot of black people in San Diego, right? Like we're not like concentrated in San Diego. So then like me being at a protest as a black man in the front, I was terrified for my life. And I was like, why couldn't I do it? What happened? And like, I wasn't even thinking about making a shirt. It wasn't until like, I sort of like retreated back to my house and I was just sitting and thinking and like researching. And then I made the shirt, and was just because that's how I became used to sort of responding to like things through crafted and making shirts based on emotional things. And that just became my artistic canvas. And then when I posted it as a piece of art, not as a shirt to sell. And then people were like, yo, can I cop this? Can I get this? And then I just started like selling it that way. So again, I didn't go into it with the intention of making things to sell and making money. I literally went into it with the intention of writing something, a message that I wanted to be seen and heard, something I was feeling, and I wanted to have a conversation. And so I go into all of these things with that same thing. So, and then again, how I know that it's been impactful is that schools use it within their curriculum to actually like get students to talk about race issues. And so for me, when some students sent me their syllabus, and my t-shirt was on their syllabus as like, this is how we're going to start talking about the Black Panthers and this, and this, and like, whatever. I was like, oh, okay. Like this, they worked. Like that was crazy. Like more so than selling it, more so than like the numbers or it being featured in other things. It was like, teachers are using this. Educators are using this. People message me and tell me that it's been impactful. Somebody got the crying eye from the It's Okay to Cry tattooed on them. So I'm like, just seeing that impact to me has been, So I know that they're impactful, and that's been humbling to say the least.
Yeah. And it's like the intentions were received the way you wanted them to be received.
Yeah. That's just been crazy.
Yeah. What is the importance of fashion in revolutionary movements?
So like I was saying before, everything that we put out as humans is an artifact. Each one of those artifacts carries a story, and it's going to get to fashion, but each one of those artifacts carries a story. based on our lived experiences. When people interact with those stories that are found within those artifacts, it shapes how they perceive their world. And when it shapes how they perceive their world, it actually shapes how they perceive themselves, both right now and in the future, right? So it helps them actually unlock potential by receiving the stories within these artifacts. And so for me, the role of anything is that, but particularly with fashion, with something so ubiquitous, so accessible everywhere, it becomes a highly important way to communicate those things, a highly important way to create conversations. With t-shirts particularly, like cut and sew can do it, but a lot of times cut and sew is inaccessible because of price point and all that stuff. It's beautiful, right? Like a cold wall, beautiful, but some of the pieces are inaccessible. Yeah. And like, to me, the story there is more like Samuel Ross. That's the artifact. He's putting forward himself as the artifact of change. And he's also doing a bunch of other stuff. Same thing with Virgil. Virgil is putting forward himself in a larger story as the artifact of change. So even if you can't afford LV, you just knowing he existed there, that was the artifact of change. For me, with shirts, t-shirts, and the reason I stay within like t-shirts and like hoodies is because you can buy it, you can wear it every day, and no matter where you are, you essentially can be subverting and challenging that environment. So if it's an all white space and you're wearing Free the World from White Supremacy, you're challenging that environment and you're creating tension and healthy tension that can produce conversation and dialogue, which then can lead to empathy. And so to me, that's the role of, at least my purview of fashion. It's to actually act as like a living and moving statement that you can wear every day.
Yeah, you know, I asked that question, you know, if fashion has a place in revolution, or what the place of fashion is in revolutionary movements, because when I think about revolutionary movements, I think about the Black Panthers and the beret and the leather jackets and the, you know, the black turtlenecks, or you know, just the all black head to toe, or you think about with Cuba and Fidel and the army, the green jacket, or you know, Che Guevara and his hat. So
Bro, no, that's true. That's on like a whole nother level. It's just like how we can take things, reappropriate them, make them ours, and then make them a symbol of power for ourselves. Because that wouldn't even, that's like the gold chain. That's like all of the things that we have taken and made ours, right? Like those become a symbol of sort of us reclaiming power from a system that tries to take it from us constantly.
And repurposing things.
Yes.
Back in September on the Low Designs podcast, you said artists essentially have the ability to take back power and utilize brands as mediums of expression, as opposed to brands taking advantage of the artists. Do you think that with that reasoning, based off of your experience with brands, that every artist experience, that's every artist's experience? Because, you know, even in this do-it-yourself world that we live in, corporations still have the ability to exploit.
I don't know if that's every artist's experience. I think it's just like how I want to shape my experience with brands. I think that we all have the power to shape our experience with brands in that way, but it also means you have to turn down opportunities that might seemingly be great in order to make sure you're following like your true soul and like what's right in your heart. And I think for me, from working in the agency space for so long, now brands don't necessarily have as big as the cachet. Because like through the agency space, I've worked with the Googles, I've worked with Nike, I've worked with Beats by Dre, I've worked with all of these brands that like have that cachet and that coolness. And so I've seen the inside and the inner workings of those. And I've been a part of the teams that come up with the campaigns that say like, we should use this person and this type of person, this type of person. And so for me, I think, again, every artist has that power to utilize brands and organizations as a medium of expression and to help shape a better future for younger generations.
Yeah.
But again, you have to move in those spaces and stand heavy in your principles as you step into those spaces,
Yeah.
to make sure they're not like diluting the story, to make sure they're not misusing the story, to
Yeah.
make sure that what you're doing with them is actually creating space for people that are following you. And and what I mean by follow you, I'm not talking about Instagram, I'm talking about like people that are like the younger generations. Like
Yeah.
I'm reading the Black Experience in Design, Identity, Expression, and Reflection. And there's a essay in there that I think it might be a whole essay, but a piece that were like, what type of ancestor do you want to be? Like now that's what I'm thinking about as I move and like touch these different brands and organizations. It's like, I want to collaborate with you if you want to actually be a part of the narrative that I'm exploring
Yeah.
as a Black man. I want you to, like, if you want to be a part of that, let's collaborate. It's not a matter of like you inviting me to collaborate with you to tell your story so that you can sell more products by using my story. It's no, how about you amplify the things that I'm trying to do so that we can build something for true community to flourish, to help unlock potential. Yeah. And then outside of that, it's like, now I'm on this whole thing where if I'd rather build the things myself, and then if brands are interested, hopefully they come. And so even right now with Future is Color, one of the lines of projects that we're working on is We Dream, We Fly. And we did something during the All-Star game with that, where we helped redesign like a local court that's in a community in Cleveland. And so after the success of that, now we're looking to actually redo a community center here in San Diego underneath that same theme of We Dream, We Fly, by helping to shape the actual physical space. And so it's just doing it. We're working with like City, we're working with these different people. And so we don't even need the big brands, but if they wanted to be a part of it, we invite them, but it has to be within the sort of scope of what we want to do to actually give back to community.
Yeah. But how hard is that to really convince a creative to, stand firm on their beliefs and their intentions with their design? Because a lot of people may not be strong enough to, but they might give them some suggestions like, hey, let's do this like this, and it just compromises your entire integrity, but it's for the sake of a check. So it's like, how do you give advice to a person who may not be as strong as you?
I wouldn't say they're not as strong. I wouldn't use that. I would literally just say like, maybe you're just in a different position.
Yeah.
I think because of how I worked over the past years at the agency, I then had the luxury to say no to things, right?
Different circumstances, rather.
Yeah, it was different circumstances. So for me, I wouldn't say like, just say no because X, Y, and Z. Sometimes, get the bag, reinvest that bag into your ability to buy your own time back, as opposed to constantly working for the bag, work for your own freedom, buy your time back, buy the ability to invest in your own things, and then go back out into the world and then get brands to then also invest into your own things.
Yeah.
Like, to me, at least that's how I've seen it. And I would also say, like, it's not to say don't work at agencies. It's not to say don't do those things. It's not to say don't go through those different pathways, because I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't work at that agency, if I didn't learn the traditional aspects of design, if I didn't know digital, if I didn't know architecture, if I didn't know all these things, I wouldn't be able to start restaurants, do all that stuff. So I feel like what I always tell people, like, work in these spaces that you're passionate about. And maybe your passion right now isn't saying no to a check. Your passion right now is about learning design. And you can learn design in these spaces, but there will come a point where you will feel a tension. And when you feel that tension, that's when you start saying no. That's when you go, you continue to follow your heart. Because I think a lot of times, like, we follow our heart, we follow our passion, and then we get into these spaces and we think that's it. Right? Like, again, I could have just been like, yo, I'm in a creative space. I'm passionate about creative. I should just stay at this agency and just ride this out.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't about just being creative. It was being in the agency to learn, to perfect my skill set, feel that tension, and then the universe provided me another pathway to sort of continue to follow and explore my passion.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say, like, yeah, it's not a there's not an end goal. It's like just realizing that we're constantly evolving and following that.
Yeah.
And so that so that again, that would be the advice, is like definitely still follow those things, get the bag, get the money, do this, do that, but don't sell yourself.
Yeah.
Like when you feel like you're selling yourself, maybe that's like the universe going like, nah, there's something else. There's something else around the corner for you if you turn this one down. Like there was like a really cool opportunity as soon as I left the agency, to work with like really cool brand with a really cool collaborator, who was releasing things through that brand. And I like sat with the tension. I was like, do I want to do this? But then I literally had like this internal, I was like, I don't really want to. And the story that I'd be telling isn't going to be my own. And I quit in order to tell my own story.
Mm.
And when I say my own story, I mean like the story that I'm feeling as I'm doing research around my people, our people. I didn't quit so I can tell this sneaker narrative and how people should buy this right now. Maybe later on in life, but like right now, I didn't feel right about it. So, and I turned it down, and then Complex Con popped up for Futurist Color. Then other opportunities came about through Futurist Color. So I that's just been my experience, and like literally a lot of other entrepreneurs' experience after like talking to them have been the same, where it's like, yeah, you'll get these like kind of golden opportunities that you don't really want to do, and you feel like you're going to be selling yourself short if you do this, but it might seem cool or might be a good look in your portfolio.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing else. You have no like fallback. But as soon as you turn this thing down, that thing that you really wanted sometimes presents itself. And it's not to say that this is a given. It's not be like, that's not how life works. It's not like you turn down this and then the
Like
passion thing would
like a
just come.
month or something.
Yeah. But that's been my experience. And whether it comes tomorrow, whether it comes the same day, whether it comes a year from then, it's just those things come as long as you are following your passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of selling yourself, in that same interview, when referring to working with brands, you said if you're a BIPOC or come from a marginalized community, you're already going to have a lens of empathy in the things you create. So it's important to still view all these things as art. And if you only view these things as a designer, then your goals become purely capitalistic. How do you balance designing for companies and getting your message across while not prioritizing capitalistic gain?
Ooh, bro. That's a hard one. Um, Again, I think there's been just a luxury of the stuff with Futurist Color and the collaborations that have come out of that. So like I said, like with the Academy Awards. So at the end of last year, I personally felt like a lot of my designs were a response to oppression, a response to what was happening only here. And so I began to like dig based on that tension, do a lot more research, read like books from Akala, who's like a dude from the UK, hip hop artist and historian. And then through that, just like really seeing the influence and impact of Black people and African culture throughout history,
Yeah.
developed like brought me to that point of coming up with the series We Was There, which is like we have always been there, but I wanted to also reclaim sort of the Ebonics way of saying it, and just like no, this is also a real language. Like we came up with this based on we were oppressed, we didn't have access and all that stuff, but like we came up with this, and other people who have been oppressed throughout history didn't come up with it. We did, and there's something special about us if we trace history. And so the whole We Was There series was about me sort of uncovering, researching, looking at our influence throughout history, and just like reclaiming power. Right when I was starting to do that, then I got an opportunity to collaborate with the Academy Awards. And then their project was literally, we want to showcase the history of Black influence and impact within cinema since the beginning of cinema, right? Like oftentimes you don't think about us at the beginning of cinema, but we have always been there influencing, impacting in a multi-hyphenate polymath way. And so again, I didn't have to choose to balance because there was a project from a organization that was doing the same thing and allowed me to almost like follow the same track I was already going to do. And they provided me a pathway to explore something I didn't even know that I could explore, if that makes sense, right? Like I didn't know I was going to be like, oh, and when I'm doing this whole like tracing history, trying to reveal history through shirts and through art, I didn't even realize that I would have the opportunity to then also do that within the cinema space, right? And so I don't know if that answers the question. How do you balance it?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have an answer to it at
That's
all.
cool, man. That's
Because
cool.
I think again it's just been like, because that I'm obvious I get paid from it, but it's the end goal is the same intention as the shirts: create conversation, create space to educate around Blackness. And so for me, as long as again you stay true to what you started as, if I stay true to like those are the projects I want to work on. If you have that type of project where you're sort of tracing the history of like Black something, we're doing anthropological work, especially if it's a museum, bro, I'm all about it. I'll do those projects all day. But then also that money is going to, one, obviously I have to take care of myself, but like that money, whatever is like left over, is going to go back into me buying my own time as well as funding additional projects like the We Dream We Fly basketball courts, like we're doing another thing called Afrotronic that's tracing the history of Black influence within music, specifically within like house and all of that stuff. And so it just allows me to now fund these different things that are focused on continuing that narrative and that story. And then hopefully as I fund those things, brands will want to work with me on like those levels as well. So it creates like a sustainable cycle of literally like, I would almost say I treat design work like how a PhD treats research. So I do research, I do studying, and then I release a thesis, which is a shirt, a digital experience, maybe a physical space, a music experience.
Yeah.
That's sort of the culmination of all of that research. And then after that, I need grants. I need a brand to give me some more money so I can continue to do this research. That's really like how I look at it. And that for me, because I think I love academia, that's what makes me excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you answered that. You definitely answered that. I mean,
All right.
and I mean, a lot of these answers would just come. They may not. You may not have the answer now, but they definitely come with growth and learning experience, which is something that you've spoken about already in this
Facts.
interview. So, yeah. Do you think that the life of a creative person can be a selfish life?
Oh yeah. Yes. 100%. I think a lot of times we get into our own head and we actually don't take care of like the things around us. Especially like if you get like so trapped in like making sure you're doing the research, making sure you're telling the story, you can oftentimes forget about life. Like, so there's so many times where it's like, I don't take care of, or I don't reach out to family. I don't like reach out to friends and all that stuff because I'm like, no, I got something that I gotta do. Like this idea has to get out. So I definitely think we have to balance that. The sort of selfish aspect, or like it's finding that right balance, because you as a creative also do need that silent time to invest into yourself, to invest into your own ideas, but also making sure we're balancing it with like taking care of the things around us. And one of the things we talked about, like even the owners of the restaurant, we talk about a lot, which is in this effort to chase legacy, which is like considering what type of ancestor you want to be, in this effort to create something that then helps shape your community, that takes a lot of time and investment. Oftentimes you as an individual can leave a legacy of trauma with those you love.
Yeah.
Right? Like those who are closest to you feel a lot of trauma from the experiences they have with you. because while you've been there for everybody else, while you've been like putting on for like the community and building things, you haven't been actually been building relationships with those closest to you. So I think in that way, the creative life sometimes can get selfish
Yeah.
because it's hard to balance those two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think the selfishness of being creative can contradict with community work?
I think only if you are selfish.
Yeah.
Like I think if you haven't checked your ego,
Yeah.
like people loving your work or like giving you clout for the work you've done can build your head.
Yeah.
And then you can be like, oh, you know, I'm the shit.
Yeah.
Like I can do anything. I can do no wrong. People love me, blah, blah, blah. You can try and use your now influence to get in places, to get things, to do this and that and the other. And then to me, that then leads you down the pathway of like, oh, I'll collaborate with this brand because, you know, it's a good look. It's not around my
Yeah.
purpose. And your purpose starts to get muddy, right? Like you no longer know like what your own purpose is. You're just kind of following the cool look. What's gonna be a good look on for my brand or me type thing. So I definitely think I don't think the selfishness from what I was talking about at first clouds the community judgment. I think it's when ego comes in.
Yeah.
That's what clouds community.
Do you think that clothing with a message can become gimmicky?
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah.
100%, bro. You don't know how many things I've made and then just toss away because I'm just like, ah, this is cheesy.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like a very thin line between like, because like one, clothing with messaging has always been around. We see it in like convenience stores. We see it in 7-Elevens. We see it in like Disneyland and like all of these places.
At a kiosk
So
in the mall.
exactly, or just on the street in New York, like you see
Yeah.
people selling these shirts, and so yes, it can get gimmicky real quick. And so to me, it's more about just making sure you are always moving with intention and not just putting words on a shirt. And I think another thing that I try and do since I've worked in advertising or design, I all of the copy that I put on the shirt is mine. I'm not just like finding headlines on the internet and then just putting them on a shirt because they're powerful, right? Like I'm developing my own statement based on what I'm reading and researching and then putting it out there for the world.
Yeah.
So for me, my art is words. That's why it doesn't matter if it's on a t-shirt. Like the art itself is actually the construction of the sentences to create that dialogue and to create those triggers. If I could make it rhyme, I would be like, oh, I'm actually more of a poet than anything else.
Yeah.
But I can't do that. Like again, we've already tested that with my music. Nobody fucked with it. But it's like for me, it's more about the words are hyper important. Making sure that they are actual, like there's actual substance, there's meaning, there's a real statement there. To me, that's how at least I try and keep it from being gimmicky. And it's not like I have like some tried and true method of testing. It's just if I make something and I read it and it feels cheesy, I'm gonna try not to release it for sure.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a position during the design process where you had to leave certain messaging off of your clothing for the sake of aesthetics?
No, never. I've never sacrificed message for aesthetic.
Yeah.
For me, I think again, the thing that I take from architecture, which is like it has to function.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has to stand over how it looks.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to make it a piece that's meaningful and resonates. And so I have the type and the words first, and then I create a design that fits the words always. And if it doesn't work, I will just create something else. Right. Like, so for me, that's why starting with that big idea allows me to then go like, oh, this might not work on a shirt or a hoodie or this or this or this. So why don't we create a pop-up experience where we have poets come in and actually then sort of dig into the meaning of what we're trying to say? Why don't we create a themed dinner? Why don't we create this, that, and other? Like it just, yeah, I never limit the the message by the medium.
Yeah. Why do you feel the need to turn your empathy into something tangible?
That's a super self-reflective question. I actually don't. I don't know. That's like actually a tension that I've had. Like, talking about like the selfish part, when it's like I don't make time for my family sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, why am I doing this? Why do I feel the need to constantly, or not even constantly, like I don't put things out that often, but like put something out when I feel something. And I just think like for me, that's the way I respond. Like as an artist, that's the way I respond, right? I respond by synthesizing my research, what's happening in the world, and then oftentimes in my head, it puts together in a simplified kind of message. 1, 2, 3 sentences, maybe with some body copy. Like that's just how my mind thinks. And I'm like, put it on a shirt, put it on this, put it on this. So I think that's just like my natural response, just like a hip hop artist's natural response is to like get on the mic or write something down and then make a song, right?
Yeah.
I would say like me as a designer, it's the same.
Yeah. You know, how do you, and I believe I heard you say this in the interview as well. How do you prevent existing in a place for too long?
I think in general, like I was saying earlier, I recognize that I'm always in a space of becoming,
Yeah.
that I've never actually made it. And that was, I think, something that once I fell in love with like education and school,
Yeah.
that's something I took from that, which is like, I love learning new things. I love challenging whatever ideas I currently have. If I sit with my own ideas for too long and it's like, I keep hearing the same stuff over and over again, it gets unexciting. Not life gets unexciting, but like the act of creation gets unexciting. And so I feel like for me, I love, again, sort of like popping the bubble that I might exist in at any given time to constantly expand and grow. And I just actually had this experience here in San Diego where I realized I don't like going to places multiple or a bunch of times. Like I don't like being a regular somewhere.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point you're like, oh, there's nothing new or fresh about this experience. I know sort of everything that's going to happen. And while it's good and they know my order, they know this, they know that, it's not like I don't get like this jolt of like, oh shit, that was different. That was new.
Yeah.
I like culture shock. And so for me to remain in this space of like stagnation is I think just my natural state of being. And so even if I wasn't creating things as a designer, I feel like I would just love traveling all the time because I'm like, I need to see this and see this. The world is so fucking vast and large. Like if we limit ourselves, we limit our potential. Like there's so much out there. Like you don't know, like if you touch this one thing and this one sort of like subculture when you're traveling to Japan, if that would shape, like put your life in a completely different direction. And to me, that's so exciting that every single one of these little experiences completely reshapes how we see our world. Again, that's what's about like the idea of transformative experiences, the idea of artifacts that are created by humans reshape how we see ourselves within the world. It's like when I like fully accepted it, I was like, yeah, I just want to have experiences. I just want to touch different things. I want to go to Japan. I want to go to Paris. I want to go to Cappadocia. I want to go to Turkey. I want to go to these different places, or I would just want to go to the different communities in like San Diego or Cleveland or middle of America, anywhere. It's just like to touch the richness that is society, humanity, the world. That's what excites me. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
That was a way more long answer than I probably gave on the other podcast. The other one was like hyper focused on why it's important as a creative. But I'm like, for me, it's like, this is why it's important as a human.
Yeah.
To just be like constantly expanding because the world
Mhm.
is so vast. And as POC and as people, we love we love being around other people who reinforce our held beliefs and our held ideas so that we can start to build ourselves up.
Yeah.
And I think that's good and that's beautiful because then we get a sense of self, we get a sense of pride and power. And like, I'm surrounded by a community that believes in me.
Hmm.
But there's also so much beauty to like just stepping outside of that, stepping outside of these moments of comfort. Because as you do that, and maybe this is just like my point of view, like in life, as we get older, as we grow, we find the moments of comfort. And those moments of comfort oftentimes lead to narrowing of um, future potential, future opportunity, if that makes sense, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, and it leads to like the sort of like death of growth in a lot of
Yeah.
times. Yeah, sorry, there was like another meeting that just popped up,
That's
but it
right.
leads to like the death of growth in a lot of times. So and then there's the other way where it's just like you're constantly bursting your own bubble, you're constantly stepping outside of your comfort zone, which is uncomfortable as hell,
Yeah.
but there's so much opportunity for growth, to see
Mhm.
the world, to expand, to really lean into empathy
Mhm.
as the way. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's that definitely answered the question. And just to summarize it, I think you're just saying that making yourself uncomfortable is definitely beneficial, and that's how you prevent yourself from staying somewhere for too long. Just you know,
There it is.
yeah,
You wrap that up good.
yeah. You donate a portion of your proceeds from Futures Color to different nonprofit organizations like Know Your Rights Camp, Queer Asian Social Club, the ACLU, Sandusky Public Schools, the Sandusky NAACP. With all you've done for different communities philanthropically, you ever look back and wish that you had someone like you to look up to when you were a young man growing up in Cleveland?
Nah.
Yeah,
No, and the only reason I say that is because I personally wouldn't change anything about how I was brought up.
yeah,
I think because I didn't have someone like me, then I was able to create something like me,
like you,
if
yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. Um, yeah. I think and I think me having my father, my mom, my grandparents
hmm,
as somebody to look up to, then made me look to more humanitarian focused creative,
yeah,
right? Or you more humanistic focused creative like urban design, urban
yeah,
planning. If I had someone like me, be like, you know what, fuck architecture, fuck
mhm.
urban design. I want to be a designer. I want to make clothes. I want to do that. Like, so if I
Big
did have
rapper.
somebody like that, yeah, like honestly. So to me, having this more grounded creative as my influence that inspired me, and then I also had like this internal tension with that stuff that was more like the artsy side. I think both of those things together made me who I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I get that, and a lot of people didn't have those examples, but
Hmm.
even with you having those examples, there are going to be some kids who you could be inspiring right now to be
Oh yeah.
same exact things that you're doing.
Yeah. And this
Even
is true.
yeah,
Like the other day we were on a photo shoot with some high school kids. Like we're working on a campaign and donating to a local high school and their programming. But we were working on a campaign. One of the kids was like filming on Instagram. They
hmm,
posted it, and then one of their other like another student from their school was like, "Oh, is that Erwin? Oh, he
wow,
inspired me, or his line inspired me to create a community garden." And
hmm,
so that's what's dope to me
yeah,
is when like you get the message from the things I'm creating. It's not like go create a t-shirt line. It's go follow your method of creating something that's meaningful for your community. Like that's me. If that's what people get, that's what I love.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
Damn. What's next? I think continuing to expand Future is Color. And so now I consider Future is Color, like I was saying, it's more about like anthropological research. So now it's more of a research and design studio than it is a clothing brand. And so that's why we're reintroducing like a dinner series through Future is Color. That's going to happen between LA, San Diego, and then we're doing Afrotronic, which is going to be a space for like Black DJs to explore, again, sort of like the history of like Black music and Black sonic power. And we're doing that in San Diego. We're doing one in Mexico. We're speaking with some people to do one in London this year.
Yeah.
And then gonna come to New York at some point. But it's, like, to me, it's what's next for me is just continuing to expand the creative palette and continue to not limit my sort of creative self. And then also the restaurants and other stuff.
Yeah.
I take one day at a time. I don't know. I have loose plans for things. And then just like I was saying, things just kind of happen with Future is Color because I continuously invest into it.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it's you definitely should, take your time and
Oh yeah.
yes, don't
Oh
stress
yeah, bro.
yourself too thin. Especially you got a lot of things going on, and
Oh yeah, bro.
it almost would be a disservice to all of the communities that you affect if you're not giving yourself that time, that grace.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Why do words matter to you?
Words matter to me because dialogue and conversation matter to me. And the reason dialogue and conversation matter to me is because that's how we exchange stories at a very base level. Like, design is about expressing the words that have been put there so that people can take them in.
Yeah.
And so that's how we exchange stories. But more than that, that's how we actually build empathy for one another. And when you build empathy for one another, we unlock the true human potential. We can defeat all of the ills in the world if we really, really were to unlock all empathy, etc. Which, again, that's like utopia. That probably won't happen.
Yeah.
But that to me is why centering on words is important.
Great answer. So, Words Matter Pod with the Kill Pinnock, here with Erwin Hines, based in San Diego. He's a philanthropist, a designer, activist, just, a lot of community work. And I think that, in this time where streetwear is so popular, you with your designs and having meaningful designs is definitely a great way for people to understand all of the great work that you're doing in a palatable way. So thank you for being a part of Words Matter, and everybody like, comment, and subscribe, and yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.